And this is where I talk about in the book that the bar for customer service has been set by people outside of our industry. And so when it comes to insurance, we can explain to people how complicated it is all day long and how difficult and, well, we got to do this and that, but like nobody cares about that, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm big on what is the path of least resistance and trying to understand that and looking at how your customers are behaving. And they may behave in odd ways, but as you dig and you have that lens, I think you'll often find it's like they just want to resolve it quickly.
I'm Rob Galbraith, and this is The Future of Insurance.
Rob, thank you this is your second time on the show.
Yep.
Not a normal thing, but first time in person. So we're doing things a little differently.
Yeah.
For those who don't know you, tell us real quick, who are you and what the heck are you doing here?
My name is Rob Galbraith. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Forestview Insights. And I do a lot of consulting and training around helping what I call traditional companies, not limited to insurance, but mostly insurance, build a culture of innovation. And as for those of you that were here yesterday for my keynote talk kind of heard, I really feel like you can innovate in spurts, but to do it meaningfully, where it makes a difference for you, for your company long term, you have to build in that culture. It has to go beyond a single leader, a single project, a single vision. And companies struggle with that because innovation is a discipline. It's no different than claims, underwriting, actuarial science, et cetera, where there's a group of professionals that have been doing this, best practices that have been established, but it's a newer discipline, right? It hasn't been around for decades the way some of those others are. They don't have organizations like PLRB where you meet, you exchange ideas, et cetera. There is no, that I'm aware of, Society for Insurance Innovators. Maybe I should start that someday or
it's
something.
It's trademarked already. No one can take that, right? Done that, but the time is here.
So that's what I've done. And that's the culmination of a career in the financial services industry, a little bit of banking, a little bit of investments, but by and large on the carrier side, both in personal lines and commercial lines. Failed actuary, then moved to underwriting, 10 years in a leadership position, and then was a director of innovation as well. So have worked with innovation teams, have led innovation projects, not kind of with that formal role, but then also been in charge of working with different business verticals within an organization, and can speak to how challenging that is. So I've had some successes, many failures, and people seem to like to hear about those.
So one thing that people say about insurance, especially right now, and all the talk about AI, is it's a relationship space, and you can't replace that with AI. Claims is like that moment where, yes, the broker agent relationship with the client, that's very relationship focused and driven. And then claims is sort of the other moment of that, where it's like, look, this is this terrible moment, you're helping someone through it, or there's a lot of emotion and energy involved. That's hard to automate out. What's your take on that? Do you think that, not to use the word disruptive, but there is a lot of talk about like what's going to happen to our jobs and whatnot. Do you think that kind of human delivery, empathy, word that goes around a lot here, that's sort of protective of insurance as a space, or maybe claims in particular?
I think it's that way for now to some degree. I wouldn't want to bet on that necessarily long term, right? So my daughter has this fascination with Japan, and I was kind of telling her that in Japan there's been a lot of work done, right, with robotics, because they have a very elderly society traditionally, right? The younger family members have taken care, but because they're getting kind of, out of balance relative to where they were, right, with this elderly population. So they've created these robots with empathy, right? And so some of you may have seen, like I went to a Microsoft store a few years ago and Pepper was there, the little, automated robot there, the kind of server, whatnot. There's virtual assistants now, right, that have been shown in healthcare type applications that have empathy. So I think what's amazing is just how fast AI is advancing with ChatGPT, Gen AI, or whatever. Like some of the stuff that we thought about, AI is one step above a rules engine type thing, and so it can do these basic admin type tasks, but it can't necessarily show empathy. I think we would be mistaken if we just made that assumption. And I don't know how many of you, by the way, have ever had the experience where you are talking to somebody, maybe it's on the phone or a chat or whatever, and you wished you were talking to technology, right? And so those are the moments too that I worry about. So I do think depending on your generation, depending on the extent of it, right? So we see like with a car accident, if it's a minor fender bender, right? You take your photos, you send it in, it's auto adjusting and whatnot. If that's your first ever accident as a teen, like you might be fairly distraught. Like I remember getting caught in a very bad hailstorm on the highway, and it was literally like baseball size hail just demolished my windshield, my back windshield. And I remember just screaming at the first notice of loss person about what was happening, and for her it was just another hail claim, right? But that was like, I could not believe these baseballs had come down, baseballs made of ice had come down from the sky. So, but we can triage those, right? And say, okay, this is the first time claims, or this person prefers technology, et cetera. So I wouldn't want to make a blanket statement. So I think it's protected. I think claims is sensitive. I mentioned this yesterday in my talk, and I know talking to a couple of people after, where I think the investment of technology has come a little bit later to claims than some other parts of insurance.
I don't think anyone in the room would disagree with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because of, highly regulated, there's a lot of due diligence, so you don't want to screw with claims, right? We can mess around with some other processes, selling new products, or maybe trying to reduce expenses elsewhere. But it's an interesting time for sure. I think the answer 5 years ago would have been different, but today I would not make that blanket statement. I don't know what you think.
Well, so yesterday I was sitting in some of the demo sessions, and there was some of that discussion. It's like people were painting the picture of that moment of loss and what you do, and there's times where it's like, I just need to talk to someone, and I'm lost. It's my first claim, and it's an emotional thing. I want someone to hold my hand, and you could almost like put yourself in the shoes of someone who's like, I don't want to deal with a person right now, or it's late at night, or we all go through that kind of math. I need to call customer service, like, I sit on hold and transfer it around. I just need them to like trigger this. Can I just send a message? Or if I go into chat, would that be easier? I got other stuff to do also. Could I like send the chat message and get my other stuff done? I think we all do that estimation, and people say it's like, it's a percent. Well, it's the younger people will do this, or the older people. And I was like, I think it's often the same person. It's not even generational, or I think all of us, there's a situational decision kind of math we put ourselves through to figure out, like, in this thing I'm facing, what do I want to do? And I think one of the nuances I caught yesterday was, that's not, for this claim, I'm a phone person, and for this claim, I'm a text person. It's like, for this moment in this claim, I just need to tell them, like, the tow truck took the car. I don't need to sit on hold for that, but like, I'm so lost. I don't know what's happening, or like our situation, I need to talk to my adjuster to get through this. Same claim. It's not, well, that's a digital claim. And so we have to think about, how do we onboard and offboard, if that's a word, I don't know, people in these different journeys, or make it more unified. So it's not about like, well, you opted into doing this digitally, so I can't help you. Like life insurance had this problem. So I'm not going to say the name of the insurance company, but a Massachusetts-based mutual company put those together. They bought another tech company called Haven that has a life insurance product, and I've given everything away, so I don't know why I even pretend. But I said, so the policy number is. So I said to my agent, I was like, or my financial advisor, I was like, I was looking at picking up a term life policy for this situation. Should I just hop onto the Haven site and like get a quote there? And he's like, well, if you do, I can't access it. And he's like, but I can do it in our system through Haven, and then I can, administer it and put it into your. I was like, well, it's the exact same policy on the exact same core system. And it's just, if I initiated it, he can't see it. And if he initiates it, I can't serve it myself. Like, it's just, and they shut it down. It's just such a weird decision. It's like, we're forcing you into one channel. It's like, I don't mind buying it at like 12:30 at night when I thought of this. I'm lying, I was fast asleep. It was like 5:30 in the evening. But I don't mind buying it myself, but then like, what if I need help? Or like, hey, there's a problem with the billing, and like, we need to redraft or something. Like, can he just step in and help with that? That's what I have him for, to like, assist me with these things. It was so weird to me that they were like locking you out of what seems like a really obvious kind of path. And the reality is, like, as much as I was like, that's ridiculous, like, yeah, we kind of do the same thing in PNC too, just in different ways in different moments, right?
It's a little bit those train tracks I talked about yesterday in the keynote, of like, a lot of these technology projects, you are building infrastructure.
Yeah.
It's not physical infrastructure in the way that we've traditionally thought about roads and bridges and train stations, et cetera, right? But it is, and it's probably something where like there's a system or switch or something that hasn't been coded in, and maybe it's on the list, it just hasn't got to it yet, or maybe nobody's like conceived of that because they've mapped out each journey, but they've never realized like, well, what if these journeys coincide or intertwine? So I'm really convinced too that, and we don't really talk about it, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. I'm big on the path of least resistance for customers, right?
Totally.
So to your point, I have a claim. I just want to get to the resolution as fast as I can, and I'm going to use every tool in my toolbox to do that. And so that's when I do think you start seeing this, like, you may not know because you don't know the process, right? As a claimant, you're like, well, I don't know, this bad thing just happened, right? And so I'll start the chat while I'm on the 800 number, right? While I'm also like,
which one wins, right? Which one's going to respond first?
No, I think this happens a lot. And so as a customer, our tolerance, right, our frustration levels are much, I think what gets us, because we're used to, and this is where I talk about in the book, that the bar for customer service has been set by people outside of our industry. And so when it comes to insurance, we can explain to people how complicated it is all day long and how difficult, and well, we got to do this and that, but like nobody cares about that, right?
Yeah.
And so, I'm big on what is the path of least resistance and trying to understand that and looking at how your customers are behaving, and they may behave in odd ways, but as you dig and you have that lens, I think you'll often find it's like they just want to resolve it quickly.
Yeah. So maybe it's thinking about it as like, well, this is a relationship business, and so it's never going to get disrupted out by AI. Is like you're thinking of it too binarily, just like you're on the digital path or you're on the traditional path. So we can only serve you this way or that. It's like, it's not about whether it's disrupted or not. It's all of it's happening together. So we need both.
I'll give you just a silly example. This is like one of those inside baseballs, but I recently moved, and so had a couple things on the banking side, a couple things on the insurance side. Even though I don't work at USA anymore, I still have a business relationship with them, right? And they've got some of my accounts. And so calling on the weekend, I realized, which I would not know had I not worked there, but I was actually not talking to USA employees, I was talking to third-party contractors, and they kept putting them on hold, and it's like, I know they're reading the script of what to do, and so I was getting frustrated. My wife was doing something separate, also getting frustrated at different times, and I just told her, well, we need to call during Monday through Friday business hours to get the quote-unquote real USA employee that actually has the knowledge and the train, rather than them who's trying to ping their manager or whatever to get this, what I thought was a fairly basic, routine transaction done. So I think customers are a little more, they won't know that kind of level of inside baseball, but they sense these things in a way that they probably, because we've all been through these different processes. Things.
My car got hit years and years ago. I was picking it up from the dealership for some service, and while I was inside paying, it was parked, and there was a guy who was backing out of a space while he was reading his bill and backed into my car. So I called in to report the loss, and I worked at my carrier at the time. It was outside of hours, and they kept asking who was driving my car, and I was like, well, my car was parked and locked. I was inside. No, but sir, who was driving your car? I was like, you saying the word driving again doesn't, like, no one. But they had a system that insisted on placing a driver.
I have a field that's required.
And it wouldn't let her proceed. And that's like, wow, like, why are we doing that? And that was a third party, first notice response center. But it's like, we just set them up to make our customer irate. And did we think through that?
I mean, for me, I don't know about you guys in the audience. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, but when I call a human, like, I want expertise, I want competence, I want to cut through like having to do a bunch of screens or some like, I mean, how many times have we done a Google search now and we get that like AI summarized response at the top
even
before
if
it comes
wrong,
in?
I'll take
So,
it.
well, I was gonna say, like, it's nice that I don't have to like scroll down and click on like 4 or 5 of these links, but yeah, sometimes if you're anyone of a subject matter expert, right, you're like, well, that's not exactly right. I don't know where you got that from, whatever. So when I talk to a human, there needs to be value added there in a way that I think in the past it was like, well, I'm too lazy to fill this out online. Like, I'm just going to have the human type in my responses for me. The bar now for that human, like, you need to get me where I want to go faster, better. You need to either know shortcuts or know the right questions to ask or skip steps or educate me, right? Like,
I want to hit on something you and I were just talking about before coming up on stage. There's a lot of news coverage right now about recent college grads, especially in some of the majors that not that long ago were like, if you want a successful job and the highest earners right out of college, like computer science, programming kind of work, they're struggling to find jobs right now because that kind of entry-level coding, as one example, is being done by AI pretty well. And so companies are like, oh, we don't need to hire the junior folks. We're just going to have the senior folks who oversee the AI and the code that comes out of it and do the bigger thinking. And so we'll solve for it that way, which sounds brilliant today. But at some point, I mean, we go through this when we talk about the retirement cliff. At some point, those senior folks have moved on, retired, living off their options and grants and all the nice things that people who work at tech companies get. And you don't have that next generation because you just had AI to solve for it. So it's like, we solved a right now burning problem maybe by creating a really bad long-term problem. And I feel like we're kind of going blindly into that. Do you see that happening in insurance too? Or do you think because we're sort of in the midst of that right now where we're struggling to backfill that talent pool as folks retire, do you think we're smarter about it because we've kind of already lived that future state that maybe the tech companies are setting themselves up for?
No, it's a great question, and I don't think we're smarter about it. I mean, you probably heard the same stat that I have for years, and many of you in the audience may have as well, right? Of like, there's going to be a 400,000 job gap or whatever it is by 2025. Well, guess what? It's 2025, everybody. And I've been saying for years that all those folks that are leaving the industry, like they're not all going to be replaced one for one, right, by a human, right? This is where AI is going to fill in. Unfortunately, I think this is a continuation of a trend that I've seen for a long time. And again, apologies, I'm going to use the USA experience, but I think this applies to a lot of different companies where, when I started there were a lot of examples of vice presidents that started in the call center 30 years ago and had worked their way up to a senior leadership position. And USA was very generous in terms of some of the college benefits, right? They would pay for a bachelor's degree, they would pay for a master's degree, whatever. So you could literally start at the bottom floor and work your way up and have a very successful career there. And over the course of 20 years there, I and many of the people in the organization noticed that that was changing. There was actually a bifurcation that was happening in the workforce where more and more for those senior level jobs, people were hiring from the outside, right, from competitors to kind of come in, because if you looked at their resume, well, they had done this and that before, right? And so they had that experience, whereas somebody that maybe had worked in the call center and had gotten their degree, but they didn't have any practical real world experience, like leveraging that or whatever, they were somewhat kind of tapped out. And there were different task forces, spent to work on this, because then, if those folks at the bottom aren't seeing a career ladder, that ladder's been kind of shown off, right? Well, of course, they're going to move to a different company and it increases your churn, et cetera, right? And so now if we're saying, well, that entry level position is now being replaced by AI, and we only have the top level people, right? Maybe, not everybody can start as examiner, right? I mean, it takes years of experience and skill and knowledge and mentorship, but then the practical experience of working claims and working your way up to different levels of authority, et cetera, right? So I think we're going to be in this weird world where we've got a lot of humans training AI, and we have been, right, wittingly or unwittingly the last 10 years. I think you're going to have AI having to train the humans on how to handle some of the, I do this all day now. I handle this low level stuff for you, but let me show you a little bit like how I handle this so you can learn, educate, and kind of work your way up. I think nobody sees it. There's no commissioner of insurance that's overseeing this and like, oh, this is the way that it should work. Because we have a lot of what I would describe as robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like I keep just plugging my holes as people retire with another senior person that's probably 5 years out rather than that newer person. Hopefully would be with my company 20 or 30 years. I know that doesn't really happen anymore, that lifetime with one company. But I do think it's a major problem that nobody really has a lot of line of sight to these days.
I know you and I talked about some themes. I'm kind of abandoning all of them because I want us to just have a conversation. But there's something you said kind of in the opening and touched on yesterday. If you think about what innovation is, it's not a right now payback. It's like all of us who are doing it are putting time, energy, resources, money, frustration with new systems that don't work or trying to figure it out into trying to get to something better later. And there's a good chance we may not be here for that later. because we've won the lottery. And someone was giving me the whole, like, if you get hit by a bus, I'm like, can I win the lottery? Can that be why I'm not here tomorrow? Yeah. Like, why do I have to die in your story every time? Can I just be a millionaire? So like, we've moved on, we've retired, maybe we've left the company or whatever it is, but we gave of ourselves for that future state. And if you think about insurance, it's such a long-term business that I feel like it should almost be more in our DNA to be really good at that than a company that's like, like right now, transactional, like I'm gonna put it in, I'm gonna get the payback right away. Like, well, that's not really how innovation tends to work. So I wonder, it just had me thinking like from a hope or positivity about like, oh, we're a slow and like too long-term focused industry. Maybe that actually bodes better for us if we gave ourselves credit for that to take on innovation. Do you feel inspired now, or do you like, no, Bryan, that's not gonna make a difference?
So it's interesting. I think it's a great question. Curious again what the audience members might think about this, but I see both sides of that. Like I see a positive and a negative. The positive is, we've been around 90, 100 years, whatever it is, right, for some of these companies. And so you have this legacy. You probably don't feel threatened like in the same way. At the same time, like most people's bonuses are tied to current year results, right? It might be a loss ratio or premium growth or things like that, like certain metrics. Sometimes companies have like a part of their bonus calculation is like, oh, we successfully executed on our strategic projects and it was green this year or whatever, right? But those are obviously a lot less tangible than what was my combined ratio this year. And so, if you think about, well, what are the incentives for the people working at that company for that year? They tend to be current year, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I think that sometimes the longevity and this maybe longer term view actually makes people expect things to take a long time. So when a project comes along or a vendor comes along and says, like, I'll give you an example. So it used to be you just kind of assumed everything was going to take, at least a year, 1 to 3 years, depending on the size of the project, but nothing got done in like a year's time. So you just kind of expected that. And boy, if I could get it done within a year, like I was doing really good. Then a lot of startups, I think, started pitching themselves because they know that like, hey, there's not a lot of appetite to engage on several like 1 year or longer projects. So they would kind of promise like, we can get this done in 12 weeks, right? So a quarter was kind of something they're like, wow, I can get an entire thing kind of from beginning to end implemented technology-wise in a quarter. Well, talking to a gentleman yesterday, he's like, yeah, we can turn on a solution in a week and a half.
Yeah,
a week and a half, like, and to my insurance, and I don't doubt that at all, right? But to my insurance ears, there's like a skepticism. There's like, what? I can't get everybody to a meeting in a week and a half. Are you kidding? Because, and I've had startups tell me, or like, Rob, like every time you say, well, we have to delay the meeting 2 weeks because so-and-so's on vacation or so-and-so's going to be out that day or whatever, they're like, I have to pay my developers like for 2 weeks. Like I'm living hand to mouth as a startup, right? So you have this like, kind of small plane that's trying to refuel the jet, or, the 737 at like 30,000 feet and just mirror up kind of preferably to do this like midair refueling. It's very challenging. So I think sometimes we don't have the sense of urgency or even time scale that we think we should, like from an insurance. Whereas I think in other industries, when you face more of a competitive threat and there is more urgency, you're actually more innovative because you feel that pressure. Whereas I think we have our foot barely tapped on the gas most of the time.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think kind of like the customer experience kind of discussion we were having before, the digital, AI path and whatever, there's like a level of, I always ask people, it's like, would you accept that experience if you were the customer? Like we put our customers in, I got a letter from the new, or I don't know how new, but new-ish CEO of Verizon Wireless or their home consumer services, just extolling how amazing they are. And we had just suffered a 5-day outage where they could not have been more incompetent. Just like, I ended up having to take a day and a half off of work, no joke, just to deal with the phone calls. And I was also doing the chat. And they assured me like, we're gonna refund you for the time you were lost. A $6 refund and they had just raised our bill too. The actual time for the outage was worth more, is home, TV, internet, telephone. Yes, we still have a landline, which is just for spammers and my mother-in-law to call. There's no one else. It was more like $35 and $6 back, which took like 2 months to get. So then I get this email like, we are incredible and our customers love us and we're we've done over and above. And I wrote back. Because he's like, please email me, let me know what you think. And I was like, I appreciate that, but like, this could not be more out of touch. Here's why. And it's such a slap in the face. I was like, I think as CEO, you should have your service go out, and then without saying who you are when you call in or knowing the special number, go to the website and try to figure out how to get help and go through, like, you need to live what you're putting your customers through. I think we're not as bad as they are. And all their competitors are terrible, and that's why it's like, we're so much better than Comcast, like the most hated company in the, well, like that's a really low bar. I think there's a need to recognize, like, are we asking of our employees, of our customers, of our partners, something that actually we'd be pretty upset if we had to go through, but we've justified, it's like, well, because this system issue, or because of, we have to go through this department, like we're just justifying, like that might explain why. That certainly doesn't make it okay. And I think there's a lot of moments where we could ask ourselves, like, yeah, is that okay? Like, was that fair to our staff who are frustrated? Like, is that a good reason for them to go home exhausted later than they wanted to? Is that fair to the customer? Did we just amp up some energy with a claimant, a third-party claimant, who now is more likely to turn to someone who will get them the money that they deserve and make us pay for it and buy the free roof and all the other catchphrases that the door knockers will pitch to them. So yeah, I think there's moments we need to challenge ourselves, and I do think we can do significantly better. Like, we clearly have the capabilities and the intelligence. I think we just need that like reset of like, hey, yeah, perspective wise, let's not send an email saying that we're perfect when we've just done that to them. They did give me $50 back after, in response to the email. They're like, we're so sorry, we've credited your bill $50. It's like, that's really nice. I wasn't looking to profit off this. Sure, I just wanted you guys to wake up to it. But yeah, so we took our like $16 net savings and got a hamburger.
I was gonna say, nice lunch, yeah.
It was really nice. I'm vegan, so I didn't get to eat it. We've got a few minutes left. I don't know, are there questions, things that anyone in the audience wants us to hit on? Rob and I can ramble incessantly, so we don't have to take questions, but I'd much rather hear from all of you thoughts or things that are brewing for you. Does anyone want to be brave?
Listeners, this is an audience question that you couldn't hear, so I'm going to read it back. With all of the system projects that are going on and the new things that are yet to come, there seems to be such a disconnect between IT and the business, and IT doesn't seem interested or able to sit down and learn the business, but then they go off and build these things that don't actually meet the business's needs. How do we solve for that?
I want to hit on the first one. I've had the joy of living through 4 core system projects. And we did one at PLRB, it just wasn't an underwriting or claims core system, but you guys may have noticed we changed our website. That's actually the tool that most of our staff uses too. There are staff members in the room right now, and I'm sure they're still feeling things about the new guy who came in and put the new system in, but we're getting through it. It's getting faster, right? They're incredibly difficult. And I talked about this in particular in my 3rd book about a new core system going in. And we are terrible at it, aren't we? And it's actually for the reason that you're talking about is the business, and people talk about build versus buy, and then you blame the vendor, and it's like, whether you build or you buy, you can call it, that consultant who did it or that vendor who did it. You're probably going to talk about IT the exact same way. Like, how many companies is IT referred to as a person? Well, IT said this. Who is IT? And you better believe it's going the other way. Business users they're so difficult. They won't respond. They don't show up to the steering committee meetings. They don't get, they sign off on something, and then once it goes live, they complain about it and they say they can't work. We asked them and they said it was fun. Like, this is the way we operate. So I think what you're describing, why do we still do that? Why can't, have the IT person come and shadow you? I see companies where they will take some of their best people, pull them out of the business, which is a huge commitment, and implant them into that IT team, into that project team. Those are the ones that tend to do a lot better because they're building hand in hand IT and business. You got caught in a conversation with someone who's in the room about, is it the technology or the process in which it's designed first? Our technology choices often are just rebuilding the process that we decided on, which may have been dictated by a system probably in the 80s, when those green screens went in. And so then you see we're moving to the cloud, a new claim system. it's basically just replicating, well, the way I work is I do this, and then I send the spreadsheet over to Paul, and he does that, and he sends it to Mary, and she does her thing, and then she has to upload it, but then I have to step back in, and so we end up replicating that. I talked about a core system where an underwriter could shoot a quote out to the broker. This is in D&O insurance. And he worked with an underwriting assistant, and we showed it to him. And it's like, you don't need Erica, was his assistant. You don't need Erica to do this for you. You're working up the quote, you can just fire it off. You don't have to send her the instructions for her to write it off. You get like your competition, you're getting right out there to market. And we thought he'd be like, this is mind blowing, this is incredible. He was livid, and we couldn't understand why. And he's like, because the broker's gonna come back to me and want all these changes because I sent it to them. And we're like, okay, fair point. What if when you hit send, it goes out under Erica's name? And he's like, no, you guys will get it wrong. It's not going to be done right, or you're going to tell me you don't have the capacity to make that change, or it's going to fail, and so they're still going to come back to me. So he's like, what I want to hit a button that then sends it to Erica, and then Erica will log in, and then she hits a button, and it sends it to the broker. And God help us, that's what we built. So he had a button that didn't send the quote out to the broker, it sent it to Erica, and then she got a task in her inbox where she had to log into the system to literally just hit a button to send the email to the broker. And all of us on the project team kind of died inside. And he was like, oh, this is awesome, I love it. And Erica was like, this is the stupidest job. Like, what am I doing? I get a task that tells me to click a button to log in so I can click another button to send an email, and that's it? Like, yes, that's very easy, but that's not the most rewarding or engaging job. She wanted to become an underwriter. That ain't getting her ready for that path. We make those decisions every day. What if we were all working in sync from the start and not just replicating like, oh, I send this to this person, they send it to that, and then I have to upload this thing. It's like, well, but why? Because you've always done it that way?
See, now you're generating a lot of like war stories that we definitely don't have time for, but I'd feel like PTSD on this. A couple of things just added onto that, and I am not an expert at all in this, but this promise of low code / no code technology, a lot of people have talked about that of like, hey, you actually as the power, like a business user, but you're the power user, right? Instead of having to know the programming language, like you can drag and drop how you want that process to work and make changes to the system directly rather than having that business IT. Usually they speak two different languages, and you've got to have somebody in there that's a translator that often is more the senior subject matter expert or whatever, right? So I think that's kind of interesting. And then, you'd mentioned it earlier, Brian, this idea that AI is actually doing the programming itself. So what if a business unit could tell AI what it wants the system to be? So it'll be interesting going forward if changing our tech is as painful as it is today.
Yeah. I'll give a reverse war story. And I shared this publicly, so apologies to you guys for outing you. Ohio Mutual, 2 folks from Ohio Mutual there. This was in my first book. I was with a tech company at the time. I left a carrier before I started doing kind of advisory and book writing work. Was out at Ohio Mutual to pitch this tech, and it was a business meeting. We were with the claims folks, and there were a couple of IT people there, and we got nervous. We had just come from I don't know if you guys knew we were nervous. You certainly would have picked it up in the book. We had just come from another carrier where the IT people were there, and it's because they were going to be competing with us, and so they were in the meeting to kind of get intel to see what they needed to build to compete with us. We won that one too, which was really nice, but so we're nervous, and we're thinking either they're going to be difficult or they're going to be sniffing around to see what they can figure out. And they were super engaged, but like creative. And it was nothing about what we were talking about right in that moment. They were thinking about like long-term, this is what our roadmap is from a system standpoint. These are the kinds of things we're trying to enable. And we know we're not ready yet, but we're going to be building out. So we need to hear what the different teams are thinking about or working on or interested in, so we can think about how that fits into what we have to deliver for them, for their business. And they raised, they're like, well, what if you did this? Or if we wanted to do this in the system later, would you be able to enable that? And they were just kind of like open, creative while listening to what drove the business to look for a solution like this. And that for me was such a 180 from the meeting we had just come from. But also such a really nice example of like, you can actually coexist and be collaborative and be supporters of each other and be one team with those. I think it was two people from my team, maybe not. Like the IT people clearly understood what life was like in the business that they were supporting, and the business people seem to really feel like partners to and with the IT people. That was one company. That wasn't a business that had an IT consultancy that they hated and then this vendor who came in to pitch. Like we can do it. So kudos to Ohio Mutual. It's nice to shout out some positive things now and then, but yeah, like we actually can get there, but it takes like, let's welcome each other in and recognize like, yeah, our paychecks are all signed by the same person at the end of the day, same company name. Like maybe we could try to collaborate more, but that takes a lot of work because there's like decades of cultural, and it's not just insurance, it's not just your company. Like IT is hated everywhere. It's just, they get blamed for stuff. I had a CIO who told me like IT, especially the service desk, is a goalkeeper job. You only hear when the ball goes in the net. No one ever talks about, which to be fair is the same thing with claims. Yeah. All the negative things about our industry are about the tougher moments where something didn't go right. Like, do you know how many tens of thousands of claims are dealt with every day that go really well and people are put back together again? No one talks about that. It's this one story of this one person who went through something really bad, but that's an exception. That's not the rule, and no one talks about it. So yeah, I totally hear you. I think everyone in the room hears you, and it's on all of us to like, we can be the olive branch bearers and maybe make that different.
Listeners, this is an audience question that you couldn't hear, so I'm going to read it back. With all of the technical debt that we have in this industry, do you see AI helping to solve for that and simplify things from the top down?
Yes, absolutely. And again, don't know all the details, but I had a friend of mine that was previously at Salesforce, and he left to kind of start his own company. And so he kind of, went away for a while, and then he came back, right? And he was showing me that he had been working with some folks that could look at regulations, policy docs, you name it, and basically summarize what was different about it, right? So it's like you go to each state's regulations on how to handle, this type of claims or this type of regulation, and the AI would read it, right, and just pull out what was different about it. And not only could it read it, but then it could kind of customize the system without anyone actually having to hand program in what are the rules to comply in every state. I mean, mine was blown away. And he was saying, well, we can do the same thing from a customer standpoint for a policy doc. Like if we're on the agent broker side and they want to know, well, what are the coverage, not just the price differences, right? But what are the meaningful coverage differences in these different products that you're being offered? Like the AI could do that kind of in a snap and make the broker look like a genius, even though the broker may have a vague idea, right? Because, he or she is selling these products, but isn't going to know maybe some of the minutia on, additional living expenses, how many days and what percent.
When it changes so frequently, carriers are moving that stuff around, so they can't keep pace across how many markets are they representing and the agents. Yeah,
it's interesting. We had a chief underwriter years ago at USA that he was big on what's known as the optional federal charter, right? With this idea of like some insurance companies could choose to be regulated at the federal level rather than each individual states. And I remember all the political guys, whatever, were telling them like, no, we don't want to support that. Like we want this fractured environment because it's protecting us from international competitors, right? The Generali's, the Avivas, like all these really large companies. Not to mention some of the large Asian financials like coming in and competing. And so it is interesting, like to your point, where of course our fragmented regulatory environment can be a discouragement for whether it's a startup or whether it's a international competitor from coming into our market in a meaningful way. But if technology could somehow simplify and bring down those barriers where you don't need this like legal change, right, of allowing for an optional federal charter, but could just make the cost of compliance radically lower. That would create I think new entrants, a meaningful competitive environment. And from my standpoint, right, as a industry cheerleader, like I think that's helpful. I think for all the challenges that Lemonade's had, like it's good that we have that outside threat. That it gives accountability, right? And I know at one point State Farm had like a commercial that was kind of making fun of Lemonade or whatever, and we're like, that's good. Like we want to see them I want to see that you're making an ad that kind of makes fun of this startup insurance company, regardless of how well they've done or not done, and they've certainly had their highs and lows, but. We need that kind of outside competitive threat, because if you don't feel that, then again, we talk about this like, why would I do something in a week and a half that could take me all year? I might as well kick my feet up.
I agree with all that. I would probably add one specific example that I had a venture capitalist on the show a couple months ago, Dave Wexler, was he left InsurTech and he's doing other stuff now. But he made a point about AI kind of, instead of replacing the green screen stuff and migrating the data, he was actually frustrated to see some carriers using AI to bridge the gap. It's like the AI is sort of like moving the stuff back and forth from the new tool or the cloud to the old data warehouse, instead of the carrier investing probably tens or hundreds of millions of dollars to try to modernize their data and make sense of it. And I said to him, I was like, but why is that bad? And like, if that gets us where we need to go, and he's like, because it's sort of a crutch. You're never actually solving the problem. And I totally hear that. But I also don't know that we ever could or would solve the problem. Like if the problem's that big, that complicated, and the risk of failure, putting aside the dollars, like how many of you have dealt with data migrations that have created massive pain? So if an AI solution can sort of sit between and shuttle the necessary information into the answer the new system is looking for, why is that inherently bad? I get that it's like, well, we're keeping this legacy stuff up forever. It's like, yes, and is that a problem? And I'm like, well, then there's coders, and we don't have anyone who can work on the old system. I don't know. But I think that's a really interesting path, and could that actually get us to move forward? So that's an interesting spot for AI, like a really particular area that could be an unlock for us. And Dave's not in InsurTech anymore, so he doesn't have to worry about it, but still a good guy. That's all the time that we have. I really appreciate questions. Thank you for sitting here. And Rob, thanks for sitting down again this is the last episode of season 7 of The Future of Insurance. You're wrapping up one of the biggest podcasts in the world ever.
And I would be remiss, Brian, you did not mention the InsurTech Geek podcast, of which I'm a co-host.
Yes,
so
yeah.
Well, you have to put a plug in there.
You should have said that in your bio. I'll blame you.
I should have. That's true. Yeah. So, in addition to Brian's podcast, the PLRB podcast, go check out the InsurTech Geek podcast. We are on episode 160-ish.
Okay, so there's 3 podcasts.
There are three. You got to add.
And I always recommend listen to it on a faster speed, because anything, like at least 1.5x. It's a slow industry. Let's speed things up, right? Thank you for joining me, and thank you to all of you.
Pleasure. Thanks, Brian.
Guys.